Hello, and welcome back to the Jason Parham Road to the Show on MLB The Show 18. I'm Tyrant Saber, and I've been promising, or threatening, to do this for a while now. But since we've reached the All-Star break for the 2019 season, I think it's a good time to take a break and examine how Jason has done, where he is, and where I want to take his career. We're going to talk today about the objectives of this series. We're going to talk a little about baseball statistics and which ones I'll be looking at. We'll talk about Jason's performance over the last year and a half, and then we'll wrap this up. And if you're just in it for the baseball, well, we'll be back to the games soon. So if you want to bail here, I won't be too mad. For everyone else, why don't you have a seat, get comfortable, and let's begin. In the short term, of course, the goal is to make it to the major leagues, the show. That's the name of the game, after all. But what I really want for Jason is not just to get that cup of coffee in the majors, but to become the team ace, win Rookie of the Year, win the Cy Young, become an all-star, win World Series, break records, and ultimately get him into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The goal here, then, is to develop into a great player as quickly as possible, perform as well and as consistently as possible, and then to play at the major level as long as possible. Now, let's none of us pretend that I'm going to make, or that you're going to watch, easily 15 to 20 seasons worth of games. It'd be something like 600 games for a 20-year career, assuming no injuries, which would be something like 2 years worth of daily videos. And let's also recognize that the way I'm playing the show 18, with the bit difficulty all the way up to legend, I'm not going to rack up the strikeouts and the wins in the way that I might need to. And even if Jason does become the next Clayton Kershaw statistically, we have to still contend with every other part of the game. There's no controlling for the defense or the team he finds himself in front of, the teams he winds up playing, the way he plays, how many innings the coach leaves us in for, how many runs our team scores, and the way the game simulates every other pitcher blowing up the league. So as long as we have those caveats in mind and we accept that failure is a real possibility, we can focus on actually making it big. When I talk about Jason Parham being the best pitcher he can be, I don't necessarily mean within MLB The Show 18. I'm looking to current and historical comparisons for real-world pitchers, and being that I don't have the luxury of 40 years of scouting knowledge or major league stats to examine his play, that means I have to focus on something a little more abstract: his statistics. Baseball is a game of statistics more than any other professional sport, just because each game runs so long and there are so many games played. We talk about players by their stats. He's a 300 hitter, ERA under 3, and so on. Because of the richness of that data set, it means you can get a much better idea of each player's talent level based on their performance over time. You've heard me talk a couple times about certain stats not being really representative of that talent level. Let's take a really basic one: pitcher win-loss records. The rules of the baseball are very strange in the way they parcel out wins, which you usually associate to a team effort in team sports, to each pitcher. Basically, baseball says if you won the game, you're a good pitcher, but if you lost, then obviously you suck and it's all your fault. But that's not how baseball actually works. You win the game by scoring more runs than the other guy, and the pitcher doesn't really have a whole lot to do with that, Jason's flukish batting aside. You can hold down the other team as a pitcher, and that's an important part of the game, but strictly speaking, pitching well doesn't earn you any runs. If you're a good pitcher on a team with bad batting, then you're probably not going to win even if you throw a lights-out game. Same's true in the other direction. If you pitch like crap and give up a bunch of runs, but the other guy throws worse than you do and gives up even more runs, then you still get the win. In short, win-loss records are dependent on way too many other factors to really speak to whether you're a good pitcher or not. You can also look at another one that seems pretty simple, batting average against, and realize that it's not telling you the whole story. The thing about batting average is that it's both too selective and too vague at the same time, and it's best just to explain it by the formula you use: hits divided by at-bats. Well, a hit is just one of the good results that can come at the plate. You can also get on base by taking 4 balls, getting hit by a pitch, being intentionally walked, catcher's interference, but even though all those things have value offensively, they all put a man on base, none of those things count as an at-bat. And by the same token, a hit encompasses everything that happens when the defense doesn't get an out on a ball in play. A hit could be a floppy little infield single that they barely beat out at first, or it could be a dinger they knock into the next zip code. All a pitcher's batting average against tells you is, how often does this guy let the batter get at least one base, barring all the other ways of getting one base that somehow don't count. So, we want to know more than what the old baseball cards tell us. We want to know what a pitcher is doing while he's in the game and how well that benefits his team. That's where sabermetrics comes in. There's been a lot of research done over the last 30 years to discern what's really happening on the field, and that has led to a lot of new developments in baseball statistics. The StatCast stuff showing up on all the game broadcasts is one benefit, and all the major league clubs are using new analytical techniques to develop their players, address problems, and scout new prospects for the benefit of the major league game. Based on research done by Voros McCracken in the early 2000s, it was found that pitchers' batting average against in one year was not predictive from one year to the next. You couldn't tell what their batting average against was going to be next year based on what it was this year or last year. In fact, he determined that fully 30% of all balls hitting to the field of play landed for a hit, irrespective of pitcher, defense, or ballpark. And that's the basis of BABIP, batting average on balls in play, and it's fully expected that whatever results a pitcher is seeing, good or bad, generally you could expect them to regress over time to a BABIP of about 300. Now, if you're able to pitch in a certain way, if you can generate a lot of slow grounders and harmless pop flies, say, you might post a lower BABIP, but it takes a lot of balls in play, like 3 or more seasons worth, to actually reach a level of confidence that lets you say that BABIP is the result of your skill and not just, say, random-ass chance that will regress to a 300 batting average against sooner or later. But from that same discovery, that balls in play will fall for a hit about 30% of the time, that allows us to say, well, if we just assume that the balls hit into play are completely out of the pitcher's control, then why don't we build a stat that looks at only what they can control? And that's FIP, Fielding Independent Pitching. Here's the formula, but basically it says, strikeouts are good, walking the batter on balls or hit by pitches is bad, and giving up home runs is the worst. So when we weight everything according to the value of each kind of event on the field, and add a constant to put it on an ERA scale, we get a value that imagines what a pitcher's ERA would look like if the defense around him was strictly league average. ERA, by the way, is earned run average, and it's just earned runs times 9 divided by innings pitched. Basically, if you let this guy throw a full 9-inning game, how many runs would he give up on average? Lower is better. The difference between ERA and FIP is instructive. Basically, ERA is how many runs the pitcher has given up, while FIP is more like what the pitcher should have given up. Looking at the two together, you can say, oh, his ERA is bad, but his FIP is good. He's either been unlucky or playing in front of a bad defense. Or, oh, his ERA has been good, but his FIP sucks. He's lucky to have a good defense or has just gotten some good bounces. That's not always true. There are some ways in which a pitcher should be giving up more runs than he does based on his FIP, but doesn't. He could be walking a lot of guys, but they don't all come at once, or he can walk guys and it doesn't really hurt him. But in general, you want a lower FIP because that means you're giving up fewer home runs, fewer walks, and you're striking more guys out. In the same way that balls in play tend to fall in 30% of the time, your average fly ball goes for a home run about 10% of the time in the major league. The stat home runs per fly ball percentage pretty much explains itself, but in the same way that some pitchers can keep their BABIP low by pitching a certain way, generating a lot of soft contact and ground balls lets them keep the ball in the yard more often. You also need a large sample size to be confident of that, just like BABIP, and you're far more likely to regress towards that 10% average than you are to maintain a hot or cold streak. It's more accurate as a baseline stat. If you're only at 6 or 8% on home runs per fly ball percent, you're probably due for a lot more home runs in your future as you regress towards league average. One of the most important and most controversial new developments is the idea of WAR, wins above replacement. How about an extended metaphor? Let's say MLB commissioner and nation supervillain Rob Manfred gets it into his head that he wants to replace baseball players with robots to speed up the game, built in his island volcano lair. These robots aren't very good players compared to, say, Mike Trout or Clayton Kershaw, but you can buy them for cheap and there's as many of them as you need. If you put 9 of them on a team, you can expect to win about 48 games in a major league season, which isn't great baseball, But if you're the White Sox, you just slashed your payroll and given your fans about 3 more wins on the season. But if you actually want human ball players on the field, you need to justify how much you're spending on them compared to one of these robots. Given the Major League roster size of 25 players and your team's particular salary limitations, you want players who will contribute as many wins as possible. And WAR is a way to judge players' value based on their ability to score or prevent runs, which has been established. You can't win games if you don't score runs. The more runs you contribute to the team, either by batting or by your pitching or defense, the more wins the team accrues and the higher your WAR grows. By the same token, the more WAR you contribute to a team, the more valuable you are to it, and the more money they can justify paying you a higher salary, and not replacing you with the Claytron 9000. That's the kind of logic behind WAR. There's a ready supply of replacement-level players, guys who aren't all that good but are cheap and plentiful. And if you're going to spend millions of dollars on somebody to fill one of your roster spots instead of one of those cheap guys, you want somebody who's going to give you maximum value for your money. The exact values that go into calculating WAR are kind of a shit show, and I'm not going to go into it here, but basically, I'm using Fangraph's formula for calculating pitcher WAR based off their FIP. Basically, it compares your FIP to the league average, determines how many more runs you prevented than the average pitcher, and determines how many wins you contributed to the team based off of that. It's not really intuitive because in each game you're only contributing a fraction of a win unless you go absolute ham, but over the season those partial wins hopefully add up to something greater than 0, thus justifying your continued employment in the majors. One thing I will note here is that despite leaving the WAR calculations in on the minor league sheet to make my life easier going forward, I can't really use WAR until I make it to the majors, and that's for a couple of reasons. For one, the formulas and the constants and everything are all meant for use in the major league, and I'm not facing major league opposition. For another, the stat is park adjusted, meaning it takes into account whether you pitch in hitters or pitchers' parks at home, and I don't have any of that data for the fictional minor league parks in the show 18. And lastly, I'm not interested in seeing how much better Jason is than the competition in AAA in WAR, because right now, we are the replacement level player in that comparison. If we're lucky, we might get a leg up on the Padres' weakest starting pitcher at this point, but that's less a compliment to us and more a testament to how bad the rotation is right now. So, WAR is there in the background, and we'll be looking at it later, but right now it's not useful for us. And there's plenty of other stats that give us good information about how a pitcher is doing, but that's a subject that could fill a whole video on its own, and I might leave it for the future. For now, I'm just going to move ahead to Jason's numbers, but if you want to read some more about why some stats are busted and others are better, there's plenty of books out there about it. Smart Baseball by Keith Law is one that I recommend because it's instructive, it's clear to understand, and it's entertainingly written. So, after all that, let's take a look at some of Jason's stats from 2018 and 2019. Taken together, Jason threw 145 innings in 2018 in AA. His ERA was 3.48, and his FIP was 3.37. You can see more of a difference in the season splits with the curve and with the missions. Before he went to San Antonio, he had a 3.93 ERA and an FIP of 3.64, so he was suffering about a third of a run per game with the defense he was throwing in front of in Altoona. Once he got dealt, he had an ERA of 3.01 and an FIP of 3.19. Jason was throwing significantly better in the second half of the season, but he also got a little lucky or had a better defense with the missions. He also started allowing fewer base runners with San Antonio with a whip of 1.10 as opposed to 1.32 with Altoona. He also only allowed 12 homers in all of 2018, 7 with Altoona and 5 with San Antonio. But before we get too happy, we should remember that home runs are less common in AA anyway. Compared to the real-life 2017 season, the majors saw over 6,000 dingers hit, while all of AA, the Eastern, Southern, and Texas leagues, combined for just under 3,200. He was also allowing home runs with the missions at a rate of 6.5 per fly ball, which is better than his Altoona numbers of 10.1%, but both are within a typical range of the 2017 AA average of 8%. Jason also had a dip in terms of strikeouts per 9 innings, going from 7.85 to 7.53, but the funny thing is his strikeout percentage, the numbers of batters that he struck out, stayed constant at 20.5%. And what you might interpret this to mean is the drop in his whip, the number of number of base runners he's allowed per inning, means he's facing fewer batters per inning and maintaining the same rate of strikeouts to the number of batters he faced. In 2019, by comparison, he has thrown 11 2/3 innings in just the first 3 months of the season, and his ERA is 3.22 at the All-Star break. That's better than last year's average so far, but he's also got an FIP of 4.02. In short, if the Chihuahuas on the field weren't great fielders, a certain third baseman notwithstanding, Jason would be allowing almost a full run more per 9 innings than he already is. He's also struggling to get strikeouts, since both his K per 9 and his strikeout percentage dipped precipitously from last season to 5.5 and 15% respectively. On one level, this is expected because he made the jump from AA to AAA ball in just 1 year and is still really lacking in areas of his development. But he's also benefited from a lot of luck and some really good fielders. We can also see that in his home runs per fly ball percentage. He went dingerless in the first 9 games of the season, and despite allowing 10 homers in the second 9 games, he's still only at 8.7 home runs per fly ball, and the AAA average is closer to 10%. It probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that there's been a spree of homers of late, and we should expect Jason to give up some more. This is a big part of why Jason's FIP has taken such a big hit in 2019. Homers impact FIP very strongly, and the lack of strikeouts to counterbalance them doesn't help. Either way, he's already at 10 homers at only the midway point, almost as many as he gave up all of last year. And if he can't limit the barrels the other guys are getting, he's probably going to give up another 10 more before the season's over. So, more importantly, are those good numbers for a AAA pitcher? Well, let's step back a second and assume for a moment that there were only 2 pitchers in AAA. Jason, and everybody in AAA who isn't Jason. If we take every pitcher who stood on a AAA mound in all of real-life 2017 and mash all their stats together, we can see what their stats are like as a composite. So this horrifying amalgamation of minor leaguers pitches about 2 1/3 innings a game, because it counts relievers as well as starters, has an ERA of 4.38, an FIP of 4.34, a whip of 1.39, strikes out 7.98 batters per 9 innings, and 9.9% of their fly balls go for homers. In that respect, Jason is doing pretty well on everything except the strikeouts, which we need to work on as soon as we get the home runs down. Let's also take a look at a real-life comparison. In the 2017 season, Wilmer Font played 25 games for the LA Dodgers AAA affiliate, Oklahoma City. He threw 134 1/3 innings, and in that time, he struck out nearly 12 batters every 9 innings, allowed only .74 home runs per 9, had an 8.0 home run on fly ball rate. With everything, he had a 3.42 ERA and a 2.98 FIP. Does that mean that Jason is necessarily a worse pitcher? Well, kind of, but it's worth remembering that Wilmer Font was also 27 in 2017. He'd been playing double and AAA ball since 2012, and he's had a few stints in the majors before now. It's also worth noting that Wilmer Font is currently posting a 12.38 ERA and a 9.27 FIP as a reliever for Los Angeles and Oakland. The step up to the majors isn't an easy one, and his fate, being too good for the minors but not good enough for the show, is one I'd like to avoid. But either way, the point is, Wilmer Font has had probably about 8-9 years on Jason to develop more as a ball player, so the fact that he's throwing better than Jason is not necessarily unexpected. But at the same time, did okay for himself in 2017. And while we're talking about real-life ball players, how about we look at somebody you've never heard of? Remember how Jason got picked by the Pirates in the 25th round of the 2017 Major League Draft? Did you ever wonder who the real Pirates picked in that spot? Well, meet Eddie Mull, a right-handed relief pitcher from California, an alumnus for George Washington University, who was selected by the Pirates in the 25th round of the 2017 Major League Draft, and who is currently a member of the Bristol Pirates, a rookie-class team in the Appalachian League. It's a short-season league, so Bristol isn't playing yet in May of 2018. But last year, Eddie played 18 games, threw for 25 1/3 innings, collected 12 strikeouts, and held up a 2.13 ERA. Good luck on your road to the show, Eddie. We hope to see you in the majors soon. And before I close out today, I feel obliged to recognize the response I've gotten from everyone about this series. I have done Let's Plays of various games before on other video platforms, but this is my first mainstream series for YouTube, and I'm still blown away by the level of engagement I've gotten from everyone watching. I'm constantly surprised at the number of views, comments, and subs for what is basically my first ever YouTube-only series, and I can't express how grateful I am to you for your support. I don't plan to try to make YouTube into a career, since this is more of a one-off project than something I want to do for a living. And I've never really enjoyed asking for likes or subs, but I value every view, subscription, like, and comment that I get. If there's something that you want to see or say, do please leave it in the comments, and if you enjoy the series, mashing the YouTube buttons helps me know about it. You guys are welcome in my bullpen anytime. Regular programming resumes soon, so until next time, I'm Tyrant Saber, and I will see you at the ballpark.